Oh, yeah, here we go. All right, let's get this started. Yes! Oh, my. That's right. Welcome. You made it to the Podcast Engineering Show. I have a great guest for you today. This is legendary. So welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. I'm Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for companies, medium, big companies. And every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. I have a background in audio engineering in the music business, and I entered podcasting, and now I'm teaching podcasters and podcast producers how to produce audio professionally. On this show, we go really deep into the audio production of podcasts, and if you implement the best of what you learn here, your podcast will sound a lot better, and you'll spend less time producing them. So my guest today is Martins Popelis. We're going to talk about Sonarworks. He's actually connecting from Latvia right now, and it's a Friday morning where I am. It's early in the morning, too. My house is still cold. The heat didn't even really come on yet. That's how early it is. So Martins, welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. It's a Friday afternoon here, so the house is pretty warm already. I'm excited to have this chat.
Right? Good. So you're a serial entrepreneur. You've had multiple companies and, started them and sold them. And now you're co-founder and CPO of Sonarworks. And Sonarworks is a product that I've been using for, a few years now. And we're going to talk this whole episode. We're basically going to talk about Sonarworks. And I have to cough. Can you hear that weird little thing in my voice? All right. Now, is that clear?
I can hear you when you cough, but that's that's good.
So Sonarworks is really an incredible product. So first of all, you have, it's called Reference 4. That I believe that's your main product. And what it does, so why don't you explain it? How about it? Since you're the guy and you're here, why don't you explain Reference 4 to us?
All right, let me do that. So the problem that we're dealing with is the simple fact that all the speakers and all the headphones actually color the sound. They are basically acting like a random EQ that sits between your sound and yourself when you hear it. When you talk about speakers, then the room has a lot of impact on what you're actually hearing. No matter how good your speaker is, the room kind of EQs the sound for you. And when you talk about headphones, then it's just between the headphones and your ears, so the room doesn't have an impact there. But all the headphones also sound different. So all of the speakers, all of the headphones sound very different, and that's actually a huge problem when you are creating music. It's a different kind of a problem when you're listening to music, but it's a problem when you are creating music or you're creating sound, you're working with audio, because when you are working with audio, then obviously you want the stuff that you're producing to sound as good as possible and to blow everybody away with the quality of audio, among other things. And when you're creating sound, then you usually have quite a lot of tools in front of you that you can use to actually get it to sound exactly the way you want it. You have all sorts of EQs and kind of things that can color the sound and things that can put different effects on it. Point being, you can make it anything you want. But then if you're listening to the sound that you're making through a random EQ that you are maybe aware and maybe not fully aware of, then that impacts what you are making in the track. And then if you're completely unaware of it, then, the problem is the translation problem. What happens is you create something in your studio and then you go to your car to listen to it, or you send it to your friends, and you hear that it doesn't really sound as good as it was in your room. And oftentimes it actually sounds bad. And then that's the translation problem. So coming back to what we do with the Reference 4 product is we have this neat little software package that allows you to calibrate the speakers and calibrate the headphones to establish a consistent reference sound in your room and on your headphones that's neutral and clean, and that enables you to kind of trust the sound and arrive at something that sounds good and that translates out of your studio very quickly and efficiently. So that's the essence of what we're doing.
Yeah, and it is so important. I tell all my students that you have to know what you're hearing. Like, if you don't know what you're hearing, then how can you possibly tell? How can you make it sound good? Or how do you know when it sounds good if you don't know what you're hearing? It's literally that simple.
Yes, exactly. Kind of, if you're listening to it and you think that you just got the voice to sound just right, but your headphone happened to have a boost just in that frequency range, then you might as well tune that sound for your particular headphone. But as soon as you listen to it on a different headphone, then it's going to sound quite awful, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the translation problem. That's a great way to put it. And I love one other thing you said, which is that speakers and headphones and the room you're in, all of those things effectively EQ the sound. So it's almost like your headphones EQ the sound, your speakers EQ the sound, and whatever room you're in causes the sound to be basically EQ'd. So what Sonarworks Reference 4 does is it flattens out that EQ curve. So now the sound that's coming through your speakers or your headphones is actually like flat. It's just, it is what it is, and you can hear it for what it is.
And there are two problems associated with that EQing that goes on from speakers or from headphones. One is that you just can't really, if you're working on a flat curve, then you actually can work granularly on the amount of bass that you want, on the amount of kind of treble, on the amount of mid-range that you want to your sound, kind of to implement your vision. But if your room, for example, has a lot of bass in it, so your room is effectively, and your speakers are effectively adding a lot of EQ in the bass region to your sound, then you will make your track to be kind of bass lean, because you'll say, hey, this sounds already good, right? So one thing is if you're not working on a flat curve, then you can't really get the balance right. But the other thing, which is also interesting, is that if your speakers, for example, add like a dip or a peak to your as an EQ to your sound, then your brain is actually also quite a heavy DSP unit that's kind of doing all sorts of calculations on the sound, and the brain is programmed to actually focus on the peaks in the sound where it's louder, and then it's also then programmed to kind of pay less attention to the things that are right next to that peak. So if you have a peak at, say, 1200 hertz, or you have a peak at like 3000 hertz, then your brain is actually going to zoom in on that frequency, and it's going to not pay attention to things that are like 1400 hertz or 1000 hertz, and you're going to miss details in that. And then when you go out and listen to something that's doesn't have that peak, then all of a sudden you're going to go, ooh, what's that thing that's kind of coming up here in that frequency? I didn't hear it before. So you're not hearing all the detail if your curve is, if the speakers or headphones don't sound flat.
Right. And I just want to mention, I forgot to mention this before now. I own Reference 4, and I got the whole kit from you, which includes a microphone. And so what I did was I played tones. You play tones through your speakers, and then you move the microphone around, and the application that you guys have walks the user through everything. Like, it actually shows you where to move the mic. Okay, move it to the right 2 feet, and then you move it, and it actually shows on the screen you moving the mic. And what it does is you put the mic in several different spots, many different spots, and then the tones play through the speakers, and that's how Reference 4 gets the information about what do your speakers sound like, what does the room sound like, and then it builds the custom curve that's going to basically negate any EQ from the speakers or from the room. So I want to talk about that process, but I also want to mention, before I forget, because I'm like a little Sonarworks fanboy over here, I also bought my headphones. Excuse me. I use Sennheiser HD650 HD headphones, and I bought them from you guys, and you guys did the custom calibration for me. So the headphones I bought from you in your, I don't know if it probably wasn't you, Martins, but someone in your office or laboratory, I should say, took out the headphones that I'm wearing on my head right now, took them out, tested them, and basically created a custom curve for this exact pair of headphones, and then you shipped them to me, and then I put them on, and I was like, oh man, this is awesome. right?
Yes, I'm happy to hear that. From time to time, actually, quite often, some users write back to us or come to us in a trade show and basically come by to say, thank you, you've changed my life. I can now do a much better job at recording audio and my recordings are coming out much better. So I'm happy to hear that, really. That means that we're hopefully doing a good job with the software that we're building.
Yes, you are. And one thing I can tell you, too, is that on my speakers, on my monitors, I use the Neumann KH120As. They're pretty good monitors. When I use the system-wide on my Mac, so it's a system-wide little app which processes all the sound coming out of my computer, whether I'm watching YouTube videos or mixing in Reaper, right? Any sound, all sound, it'll actually process that. But when if I don't have the Sonarworks on, and I start listening to audio, and mostly with audio production, I can tell very quickly now when I don't have the Sonarworks turned on because it just sounds weird. Like there's these weird like low mid resonances, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. And then I put on Sonarworks, and it's all gone, and it sounds fine. So,
yes, it grows on you, right?
Yeah, and now I can't live without it, Martin. So thank you for creating it.
Welcome. If you want to kind of chat about, we started off with talking about what is it that we do and what's the problem that we're fixing, and now I believe we're moving into how we do it and why is it that it actually works and delivers the miracles we're now talking about, right?
Sure, let's do it.
There is a difference between speakers and headphones about how you actually apply it and how it works. For the speakers, as we already mentioned a few times, the room plays a lot of impact. There's really kind of no matter how good the speakers are outside of the box, the room really puts its own EQ on top of the speakers. So the room has a huge impact on what you're hearing. So for the speakers, you actually have to measure the speakers and the room together as a combination. The speakers and the room and the way how you place the speakers and the way how other objects are placed in your room are really one kind of set system. So when you're talking about speakers, it's not only your speakers that define the sound, it's this whole room environment in which they are in that really define how these speakers sound. So to get the speaker sound right, the user has to really measure the speakers with the room to learn how they sound for him or her, particularly in the sweet spot where the user is working. Right. And for that, you have to use the measurement microphone. So we ship our software with individually calibrated measurement microphones to get the sound accurate. And that's really important to use a measurement microphone because your measurement is only going to be as good as your measurement microphone. Kind of that's the only way how you can really find out what's the coloration and what's the true neutral sound in your room. So the user has to measure the speakers with the room, and we have developed the software with really keeping in mind that the user would want to get back as quickly as possible to creating the music. So we've really tried hard to build this interface as easy and simple for the user as possible. And as you already mentioned, we're doing this multi-spot measurement around the sweet spot. The user has to measure 37 points around the sweet spot where he or she is sitting, and the software basically sweeps. It sends a sweep signal through the speaker and listens in on the microphone and finds out kind of what the frequency response is in that particular spot. And the software locates the microphone with each measurement, which enables several very cool things, actually. One is it enables very easy user guidance, so we don't have to write a thick manual about how to do the measurements of the room. We can just ask you to hit different spots that you can see on the screen, and it feels more like a small computer game that you're playing. But then that actually enables consistent user guidance and consistent way how different people measure different rooms across different situations, or even you yourself, if you do 3 different measurements, then this interface actually ensures that you are doing the same thing every time. And that allows us to achieve a very important thing, which is the results actually come up very consistent. We can actually deliver consistent reference sound between different rooms and between different users. It means that if you measure your Neumanns in your room and then apply the calibration profile for you, and your friend measures his Adam speakers, for example, in his room somewhere in another city, then and applies that correction curve, then those sound, they will actually sound frequency response wise very similar to each other. And if you happen to then discuss audio over distance without being in each other's room, then you're actually going to hear very much the same sound. So you can talk apples and apples when you talk over distance, which is quite important.
Yeah. Now the measurement process is very easy, as I mentioned and as you mentioned. But what if I take a measurement, and then what if I move like a piece of furniture in the room, or if I move a table like maybe 2 feet to the left, or like, I assume if I move stuff around too much, then I should definitely re-measure and recalibrate my speakers, right? But what is like?
Absolutely.
Can I move something a few inches and it should be okay still?
So as I mentioned, the kind of speakers, room, and all the objects in your room are basically one set system that define the frequency response and that define the sound that you're hearing. So it looks like you're kind of sitting outside of the speakers, but if you think about it, you're in a way sitting also inside the speaker, because the room is a very essential part of it, and your furniture in the room is also a very essential part of what you're actually hearing. So
right.
Since that measurement process that we've designed is actually pretty quick, I mean, first time it will probably take you like up to 30 minutes to go through it, but then when you're set up and when you know what you're doing, then the next time will be like 15 minutes. So it's really quick and simple to repeat the measurement, and therefore I would actually recommend, I mean, if you move something like very, very little, then probably kind of nothing major will change. But if you move something around, then it's good to reshoot the room and reapply the calibration just to be sure that you're actually you still have the reference sound. And even if you're not moving things around and you own the reference 4, I would encourage everybody to like remeasure your room like every month or every few weeks, because sometimes speakers wear out, sometimes something changes without you necessarily noticing it in the room. So it's just kind of good to remeasure it once in a while so that you can just be confident that you are hearing the right thing in the room.
Yeah, that makes sense. That really makes sense. So now I have to do that. So maybe later today I'll remeasure my speakers in my room. I've heard some people say, so yeah, when someone buys the Reference 4 package, you do get that microphone. You sent me a microphone that comes with the package, and that's the mic that you guys recommend.
You can get the software also without the microphone, so you have to use a measurement microphone. If you own one already, and it's a good measurement microphone, then we don't restrict you, kind of go ahead and use your own measurement mic. So you can get the software without the mic, but generally in the recording studio space, people more often don't have a measurement microphone than they do, and so we have a package with a measurement microphone, and we recommend using because, as I mentioned, it comes with a individual calibration curve that we do ourselves in our lab, so we can really sign off on that calibration curve. And that really gives a very good measurement microphone to use for speaker measurements. So
right, yeah,
yes.
That was my rationale. Was like, look, you guys are building this measurement software, and you have a mic that you recommend. So my thinking was, I'm just going to get your microphone and use that, because you probably calibrated Reference 4 to that microphone, sort of, right?
Or yes, I mean, we're kind of yes, you can say that.
Okay.
I mean, the trick with the measurement microphones, if you want to go deeper there, is that if you use a fairly expensive measurement microphone, like $500,000 plus range measurement microphone, then those are very accurate devices. They are neutral, and they are very consistent also from unit to unit, right? Then if you go into more the budget segment of measurement microphones, and obviously we're building this software package to be affordable, the full package with the microphone retails for $299. So if you go into this budget measurement microphone category, and there are a number of those that you can buy also from things like from places like Sweetwater or Thomann in Europe. If you get into this sub $100 measurement microphone territory, then they tend to be fairly inconsistent between each other. So sometimes it's a measurement microphone, and sometimes it only appears to be a measurement microphone, but it actually colors the sound. So what we are doing is we are individually calibrating each microphone. It has a unique ID on the mic, and then it comes with its own individual profile. And then with this ID, with this individual profile applied to the measurement microphone, it becomes very, very accurate, and it really punches well above its weight. But if it comes without the curve, or even if it comes without a good curve, I've seen some of the curves that come shipped with these budget microphones to be quite terrible, honestly. So if it doesn't come with a good calibration curve, then it's sometimes it's a measurement mic and sometimes it isn't. So we can sign off on ours, and that's why we recommend them.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And also, I wanted to just mention to the listeners and ask you about these. So you, Sonarworks, have created profile, like EQ profiles for many, many different make and model of headphones. So like right now, if someone owns, I don't know, those 7506s, I forget, Sony MDR 7506 headphones, right? Well, they can actually, like, Sonarworks has a profile for that already. So you guys had to like get all these different makes and models of headphones and do all the testing for each one, right?
Exactly. You wouldn't believe how many headphones we've seen over the last years in our lab. So it's been quite a journey. Yes, you're absolutely right. So we just talked about how you measure and how you calibrate your speakers, and there you have to work yourself in your room with your speakers. For headphones, it's a little bit different story because the headphones are fairly fixed. The room doesn't have any impact on them. So for headphones, we can pre-measure them in our lab. So that's what we're doing. So for the headphones, essentially, the only thing that you have to do as a user is tell the software what headphone model you are using. And then currently we're supporting, like, I believe over 400 different headphone models. So all of the professional studio headphones that you might use are 99% that they are actually covered and in our database. For the headphones, you just have to tell the software which headphone you're using, and then it will automatically load the profile for that headphone, and you will be good to go. With headphones, actually, as you mentioned a little while ago, we have two modes of headphone calibration that probably deserves to be said. So one is the average calibration of the headphone model, which means that we've got our hands on a number of the pairs of that particular model. So say Sony 7506s, we've got like 10 pairs of those. We've measured every one pair, and they are a little bit different from pair to pair. So we just create an average frequency response profile that matches that headphone model. And that's one mode. I would say kind of it gets 80-85% of the job done for your headphone. But if you want to go all the way, then we actually have to individually calibrate the headphone that you're using, the particular pair. So what we do is you can buy from us a new pair of headphones with the individual calibration. So you would pay the same price for the headphone as you would in any other retail place, but then on top of that, you would pay a little extra for this individual calibration, and we would measure that particular pair. We would put an ID on the headphone, and you would get an individual profile with the headphone, and then it's as accurate as it gets when you are listening through it.
Yeah, when you guys did that for me, I think the calibration profile you sent, in the file name, it said like Chris or something, and I was like, hey, that's my profile, man. So that's what I use.
Yeah. We try to we try to please our users any way we can.
Yeah, well, it's important because, like you said, you have so many profiles in there. It's like when I look through the list, I just look for my name, and that's mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think most people who are producing and editing podcasts are doing it using headphones. So I think it's kind of rare that a podcast producer or editor is actually working on near-field monitors. So what regarding headphones, what else can you tell us that's important for people who might be working all day, every day on headphones?
And it actually, the first thing I want to say, it actually makes a lot of sense to work on headphones nowadays, especially for podcasts, because 99% of people who would be listening to podcasts would be doing that on headphones anyway, right?
Right.
So I believe it's actually also true for music. Okay, for music, quite a few people still listen to it through speakers in different environments and contexts, but still, even majority of music is nowadays, I believe, listened to on headphones. So creating audio and creating podcasts, especially on headphones, just makes a lot of sense. So that's, I believe, the first thing I would want to say. And I don't know, kind of what else is there? Kind of, it's obviously very, very convenient also to work on the headphones, because you're kind of not then bound to any kind of studio room type of a thing, and you can work late at night or on an airplane or wherever you go, and you can easily carry your setup with you. So that's also a bonus.
Right. So in terms of someone listening through headphones all day, working on podcasts, does it matter where their headphones are plugged in? For instance, I'm using a Sound Devices Mix Pre 6 as my interface. Some people use the Focusrite 2i2. Does the actual interface color the sound at all, or is it just like a pass-through?
I mean, in our experience, kind of there are kind of quite a few people are kind of worried about this. As far as we have seen in the data, any decent interface would not really color your sound. So especially if you're talking about podcasts, then I wouldn't worry too much about the interface. I mean, it's good to upgrade your interface from the default one that comes just in your kind of computer or laptop or whatever you're using. But so as soon as you have a decent interface that's sits outside of your computer, I believe you're good, and then just connecting that to the headphone output of that interface should do the trick.
Okay, and now there's a few different ways people can use the Reference 4 on their computer.
By the way, I thought of another thing kind of that's probably important about headphones and creating podcasts. Sure. If you happen to listen to headphones kind of and work on headphones for long periods of time, then basically you would want to optimize for two things. One is you would obviously want to optimize for the sound quality and make sure that you're hearing things right and it's an instrument that helps you create good audio. But on the other hand, you would also want to optimize for convenience. You would want a headphone that sits comfortably on your head for long periods of time and it doesn't tire you, or it doesn't kind of take your attention off from the actual sound that you're listening to. And in that sense, now what we do with Reference 4 is, to some extent, we bring the sound of the headphones to a more equal level. That's kind of, it kind of makes them sound very similar to each other, delivering the reference sound to all of the headphones. So it gives you, as a user, more freedom to actually go for a headphone that's more comfortable for you and let the Reference 4 do the job for adjusting the sound on that particular headphone. So it gives you more freedom to choose the headphone that's comfortable for you. That's an interesting angle.
That's a great point. I mean, especially for editors who are working all day, like, it really makes a difference if your headphones are comfortable versus not so comfortable, right? It's huge. Wow, that's a great point. Okay, so in my computer, for instance, there's a few different ways I can use Reference 4, and one of them, I can use let's say let's stick with the headphones. Let's say I'm wearing my headphones, but obviously I do that too. I have probably 1 or 2 days a month, I will only listen on my headphones. I won't even monitor through my speakers at all, just because I want to keep myself familiar with the sound of my own headphones, right? just to keep my ears sharp to my headphones. So let's say I'm listening through my headphones, and now there's a couple different ways in my computer that I can make this work. One is I can use what you guys call system-wide, which is what I do, and so system-wide, any audio that comes out of my computer, any application, it goes through Sonarworks and then comes to my headphones, and everything is flattened out. The curve is flattened out. But the other way to do it is you can actually put the reference 4 in your DAW, like maybe on the master bus or something like you can just use it within your DAW. So can you talk about the differences there and how that works? I know that's a big question, right?
Sure. So there are these two ways of applying it, as you described. So it a little bit depends on what your audio setup is and what your aim is. So on one hand, system-wide is the convenient solution, and it covers all of the audio coming out from your computer, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, your DAW where you're working, or whatever else there is as an audio source in your computer. So it keeps consistent sound between all the sources of audio coming from your computer, and it acts as a virtual audio interface on your computer. So that's kind of convenience-wise, system-wide is the way to go, and it's kind of also set and forget, and you can just kind of hear calibrated sound from your machine. But then the downside of the system-wide is there are two downsides, unfortunately, to it. One is it only has like a stereo out, and it doesn't have anything that's coming, any inputs that go through it. So if you're working in a more complex setup where you maybe want like 3 different pairs of outputs going out from your computer simultaneously, and you also want some inputs to run, which is usually the case in a more complex music production studios, then the system-wide doesn't really do all of the trick, because it just has these 2 outputs. And the other thing is that system-wide introduces some latency, because working as a virtual sound card, it has to set up some buffers inside it to suit the requirements of the operating system. So it introduces about a 20 millisecond latency to the audio chain. And again, depending on the use case, it might or might not be a problem for you. So but convenience-wise, that's kind of hands down the way that works for users. But then if you want a more robust solution that kind of handles more complex audio setups and that can go down to 0 latency, then we have the plugin that you set up on the master bus of your DAW software, and then basically you're the master of all the routing and the interfaces and inputs and outputs and everything. So you can put Sonarworks as a plugin on the master bus of your DAW, and then it fits whatever audio setup you have, and you can go down to 0 latency. For example, as another note, like if you're working, again, that's more related to music production studios, but if you're working in Pro Tools and you use their HDX interface, then you can't really set up any virtual sound card in between Pro Tools and their interface. They're kind of communicating directly. So in that case, system-wide is not a solution at all. But so for different kind of more complicated setups where you require also 0 latency, then plugin is the way to go.
Right, and I saw on a YouTube video, someone else's YouTube video, they said that you can put the plugin on the master bus of your DAW, but also some DAWs have this, it's almost like a monitor output where you can actually put a plugin just on the monitor output of the DAW.
Yeah.
Because here's the danger. The danger is if you put the Sonarworks plugin on your master bus, before you render and finalize that episode, you have to remove the Sonarworks, or else it will actually color the sound, correct?
Yes, exactly. That's the catch with the plugin as well. So the point is the plugin with the calibration that Sonarworks brings to the audio, the calibration, it's fixing your speakers, fixing your room, and fixing your headphones. So it's more part of your speaker or your room. It should not be a part of your final audio. It just helps you hear your audio better and make better decisions while you are producing it. So when you're done with producing and when you're rendering it for final output, then Sonarworks should not be part of that output chain. And that's one of the tricks with the plugin. If you use it on the master bus, then you really have to remember to turn it off when you're rendering for final output. Then in some DAWs, depending on which one you're using, you can actually set it up so that the render path is going through one bus and the actual monitoring path is happening through another bus or another track on your DAW.
Yeah.
And in that case, it's very easy to put Sonarworks only on the monitoring path and not put it on the render path, and then you don't have to remember anything. You can just monitor and render and let Sonarworks do its job.
Yeah, that is very cool. I like that. Having two separate buses for that, I like that. So anything else about Reference 4 that we should talk about?
I mean, the cool angle is we've somewhat already touched upon it, but the cool angle is that with Reference 4, what we achieve is really we are establishing consistent reference sound between different speakers in different rooms and also different headphones. When we go and do an in-person demo to a studio, we usually do this, I don't want to say trick, but we present it in a way where we come in the studio, calibrate the speakers, and then we have a pair of calibrated headphones, and you can really set up an A/B demo where you listen to the headphones, you take them off, instantly switch on the speakers with the calibration on, and you can really experience how frequency response-wise these headphones start sounding very similar to those speakers. So we're really establishing a reference sound standard across different locations. So I think that's kind of like level one. If you start using Sonarworks, it just your work becomes more consistent and you're getting good sounding audio produced quicker and better. But the other benefit that we're bringing to the world, I believe, is that we're actually establishing this reference sound standard across different locations. And nowadays, like even before this virus thing happened, more and more people are actually creating audio across distance and cooperating over distance. And in such environments, it really becomes crucial that you have the same reference sound across different locations, because otherwise you just spend a lot of time discussing the sound and arguing about, hey, is there too much bass or too little bass, or does the voice sound good, or should we do something about it, only to realize an hour later that, hey, what are you listening on? Oh, okay, I have these speakers. I have those headphones. Okay, maybe that's the problem. Right. So establishing this common reference sound across different locations, I believe, is something that's very, very helpful and productive for the world of music creation. And that's another thing that we're actually bringing to the table.
Totally. I mean, Sonarworks just gives me peace of mind. You know, like sometimes when I go to conferences, I have to produce an episode maybe for one or two clients while I'm attending a conference for 4 or 5 days. So I bring my old laptop production computer, and I bring a pair of headphones, I think the AKG K240s, and I just bring the headphones and I have the Sonarworks already on the laptop, and I just dial in the K240 profile, and I can be confident that when I'm producing audio in a hotel room somewhere, that I'm not that it sounds good and I'm not making any major mistakes, right? I just, that's a good feeling to me as an engineer. So
yeah, and that was like one good story from the early days of Sonarworks was that when we were just building the prototype for the software, I was talking to one of my audio engineering friends, Udis, here in Riga. That was like 7 years ago, I believe now, or something like that. And I was demoing some prototype of the speaker calibration, and we were talking about mixing on headphones. And he was like, oh no, now you can't really mix on headphones because they sound so much off. I tried once mixing on the headphone late at night because my kid was asleep. I did the job on the headphones. I went to my studio the next morning, and I had to kind of throw it all out and start from the scratch because the headphones and the speakers just sound so much different. So he was like saying to me that, hey, you can't really mix on headphones. We went ahead and developed this headphone calibration anyway, and by now kind of he's sold completely, and he can now work on the headphones at night and then go to the studio and just continue working on the speakers as if nothing ever happened. So establishing this reference between different devices is really helping the engineers, I believe.
Right. That's great. Yeah. And by the way, since you're in Riga, Latvia, the magician of Riga, it's actually Mikhail Tal.
Oh, wow.
Tal, he's a famous chess player. One of the greats, pretty much one of the greats of all time. Him and Bobby Fischer had some epic battles. And anyway,
cool. I learned something new today.
I just remembered. So, all right. Well, look. So, Reference 4 is awesome. But now, should we talk about Sound ID? I'm really excited about Sound ID. Can you describe what Sound ID is?
Sure, let's do it. Shall I start? Is it okay if I start with the story?
Of course, let's do it.
So the story goes, we started off with actually establishing this reference sound for music creators, and quite a few people seemed to like it, so that was all nice. But then we still were always a little bit unhappy about the fact that, okay, now you have this good reference sound in the studio, and then you create this great sounding podcast or record or whatever you're working on, but then as soon as it leaves the room, as soon as it actually reaches the end audience whom you're producing this for actually, then everybody's back to that random EQ thing. Everybody's wearing different headphones, not really knowing what they're listening to, and I have like some music friends saying, hey, I can't really listen to my stuff outside of my studio because my ears are bleeding for how bad it actually sounds out there. So we were like, hey, now when we have this capability of actually calibrating speakers and headphones, wouldn't it actually be nice if we bring this calibrated sound out to the wider world, and then we could kind of be done with the translation problem altogether. If everybody would calibrate their speakers and headphones, then what you hear in the studio would be exactly what the end listener is hearing, so there wouldn't be no more problem. Everybody would be happy. So we went ahead and we built a product for that. Actually, it was called TrueFi, and it was going by the promise of hear studio sound on your headphones, and it was a consumer audience intended product that was basically bringing the calibration out to the consumer market. And we were very excited about doing this, but long story short, that product failed because not enough people really liked the sound. It worked and it delivered on the promise, but not enough people were saying, hey, I actually like this sound. Quite a few people were, yeah, but wait a minute, I actually like that headphone sound better. So that that was a somewhat sad moment for us, but we didn't give up, and we said, hey, what the hell is going on? Let's understand why and how and what happened. So we ended up doing the biggest ever, I believe, research in consumer sound preference. We now have a research that has like close to 40,000 participants in it, to whom we have asked in various ways, hey, what sound do you actually enjoy and what sound do you actually like? For comparison, when Harman is doing those studies of consumer sound preference, they have like a few hundred people participating in them. We have like 40,000, so
wow,
it's kind of quite a bit bigger.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have this huge pile of data about what sound do people actually like if you ask them, and the surprising and not surprising answer is that everybody likes something else. People's taste in sound actually differs. Somebody genuinely likes a lot of bass, somebody hates it, somebody likes a lot of treble, somebody hates it. And then our hearing is different, and our hearing changes with age. So put all of that together, and everybody's sound preference, if you really ask them, hey, what do you like, is actually different. The top scoring kind of single profile that we found is the best possible sound for no more than 17% of the population. So It's pretty much all over the place if you start asking people what do they like.
Right.
But as a consumer who are not really into the sound as much as we are here, they're on top of that, they're not really competent to kind of judge and pick the sound when they're buying their headphones. So most of them end up buying like a random EQ instead of kind of finding some headphone that matches their preference as closely as possible. They're kind of ending up with some random EQ sound that sits between the audio that you have produced. and that they are hearing, which is essentially the translation problem, right?
Right.
So that's the story. And then from that story, kind of when we finish that research, then out of that story, we've now built this product and technology that we call Sound ID. And what it is basically a technology that uses machine learning driven smart kind of algorithms that ask the user a few A/B questions about what sound do they like, and it finds the personal sound that that particular user likes the best, and then that's the unique Sound ID profile that the user gets that characterizes how they like their sound, and then we can then deliver that Sound ID profile to various devices around that user. So at the moment we're at the early day of that product, so the only thing that you have out in the App Store is the Sound ID app that you can use to create your Sound ID profile and try it out and kind of see if you like the sound that that the app is bringing to you. But then very soon we're actually going to be rolling out consumer-facing products in partnership with different manufacturers, where you can actually connect that Sound ID profile and enjoy this consistent, personalized sound experience. So that's the story about Sound ID.
That is really cool. I really like that because people do have preferences, and you guys seem to be making it easy for the consumer to dial in the sound they like, and that's not so easy without Sound ID. I mean, right? I mean, you go into a car. How many times have you Oh my God. How many times have you rented a car and you turn on the radio and it's just awful? You have to spend like 20 minutes messing with the EQ. Even the car,
Exactly.
I just bought a car. Bought a car, and I made the mistake of not really checking out the audio system so much. I did turn it on, but I didn't listen enough, and like, I don't know, like it's just, the audio doesn't sound good in that car. It sounds okay, but anyway, I would love for Sound ID to put an EQ in my car, please.
So exactly as you say, kind of, it's not that easy to get that personalized sound great. You actually have to work on all three of these layers that we are doing. First, you actually have to know what device you're listening through, because the device actually does the EQ by itself. So unless you take that into account and unless you start with compensating for that, then you're kind of starting in a swamp and kind of a fog, smoke and mirrors, and you don't know what you're doing. So starting with calibrating the device really is important. And I think it's also important to calibrate the device to the same reference sound that the creators are using when they're creating music. That's kind of a good starting point for the personalization. You take the audio as the creator intended, as the creator heard it in the studio, and then you establish that sound on whatever device you are listening through. And then from there, you can start kind of personalizing the sound according to the listener's taste. And then the other thing is you have to find the taste of that particular user. And the third layer is you actually have to take the hearing of that user into account. And unless you actually combine all three of these layers, then you're most probably actually not getting a very good result. An audio professional like yourself can probably fairly quickly, kind of playing around with an EQ that has high enough resolution, kind of make the sound better. But then again, your audio is your profession, and that's what you do day in and day out. For an end user, for just a regular listener out there, first of all, they're scared of an EQ to begin with, and then they wouldn't necessarily know what exactly should they do with it anyway. So we're trying to bring the simplicity and elegance to the solution, similar way how we've brought it to the music creator market, with creating this Sound ID app that kind of asks you as little questions as possible to determine, with all this kind of science and machine learning working in the background, what is the exact sound that you like as an individual, and then let you take that sound with you wherever you go. So
right. So the way it practically works, I know you guys opened up, it was like a trial or a beta, and I downloaded the Sound ID app on my Android phone, and I think a lot of people did that. And in fact, Ed Sullivan, who's a graduate of podcast engineering school, he did it. He downloaded it and he plugged in his headphones, and he got, I think he took the test, and it said that his preference was, I forget what he said, but it was more like whatever the profile was for someone who's probably an audio engineer. That was the one he got.
Probably flat.
I think maybe Yeah. Okay. Actually, I should have looked that up beforehand.
95% of audio professionals whom I have seen taking the Sound ID test come up with, hey, my preference is a flat sound.
Okay.
Which is, that's kind of only reasonable. But then as soon as you leave the audio professional community, then flat is actually the minority. So
right. So it's an app. So tell us what can people do? Can they download the app, and then how do they use it?
So it's the app is out of beta right now. So it's on App Store for Apple and Android phones. You can just go to the App Store right now and download Sound ID app by Sonarworks, and that is essentially this test. The app is the test that creates your Sound ID profile, and then you can also demo it right there within the app. Unfortunately, we're at the moment in the early stage of the product, so unfortunately for now, that is the only thing that you can do with the app. You can create your Sound ID profile, and you can demo it inside the app. But as I said, very soon we'll be coming out with products for your desktop computer and headphones, where you can actually start listening it to the profile on a daily basis.
Nice. And you know what else I remembered is, remember from the movie Jackie Brown? Did you see Jackie Brown? It was it's this Quentin Tarantino movie from the late 90s. Anyway, right. Samuel L. Jackson, he gives his car keys to John Travolta, and he's like, "Hey, go ahead and you can wait in the car." And he says, "Yeah, and you could play some music." But he says, "But don't touch my settings. I got my settings just like I like them."
All right.
Right?
So, yes. So this is kind of, this plays exactly into that, except we could solve that situation, because where we are going is, generally nowadays in the world, the big trend is personalization, right? So a few years from now, and probably even now, if you kind of go to your modern car, then it kind of recognizes you, and it has some presets for you as the user. So if you sit in your car, or your wife or girlfriend goes to the car, then the car actually changes the settings to fit her, like the person's kind of position in the car, and the kind of distance to the steering wheel, and audio settings and everything.
Right.
So with Sound ID, it would also automatically tune the sound to your preference and make sure that it sounds perfect for you.
Totally. Yeah, so the other thing about Sound ID I wanted to ask you about is when you open up Sound ID, you actually have to choose what headphones you're using from a list.
Yes.
And you have to do that. You can't get around that step.
As I said, yes, kind of where the Sound ID works on these three layers. It starts with calibrating the headphone to the studio reference level, to the flat sound, essentially, that our Reference 4 product brings you. And then it builds the personalization on top of that. So therefore, the first thing the Sound ID has to know is, hey, what headphone are you using? And then in the future, as we have more and more Bluetooth headphones around, we will build a functionality where it automatically recognizes the sound device, and we can take that question just away from the user and just know it. But yes, it absolutely optimizes the sound for your device, and only then kind of puts the preference and hearing on top of it.
Right. So my issue was that I was using, normally when I listen to really anything on my phone, I have these Bose earbuds, and they're not cheap earbuds. I think, I don't know, the Bose earbuds, they're probably like $150 or something. They're not cheap, but there was no profile for that. So I didn't know what to do. So how would a person who maybe they even have just a pair of crappy earbuds that they use with their phone, like, I guess there's really no way to do the Sound ID with any old earbuds, right?
Since we are kind of, one of the things we're working on is we're continuously building and updating the supported headphone database. So it very much could be that the Bose profile is coming out soon. We're trying to figure out which are the most popular headphones around there, and then put those profiles in the list. Unfortunately, if we don't have the profile for your headphone, then it wouldn't work. We've been asked this many times about, hey, but maybe you can do something even if I don't know this profile of the headphone. But then it doesn't really work, because if you look at the consumer headphones, and I sometimes show in some seminars this slide where we basically take all of the headphones that we have created, all of the profiles for the headphones, and we put them on a single chart. And basically you just have a huge cloud of frequency response curves that goes like plus minus 15 dB. So there is no real kind of average neutral between all the headphones that we could use as a starting point. So unfortunately, it works on supported headphones, but we're working to grow that list as fast as we can.
Right. Totally. So this is awesome. I mean, I love, so everything that you're doing at Sonarworks is based around perception. And I really, first of all, as human beings, we have this ability to hear sound, which is amazing in itself. And then it's like all the various perception of hearing sound and all the different ways that we can produce sound to create atmospheres and vibes and everything like that. So, have you ever looked into things like with what do they call that? 3D sound or multi-channel stuff? Anything like that?
I mean, I think kind of the companies like Dolby and Sony are really trying hard to get the 3D sound, the three-dimensional sound to work on headphones. So all the Atmos and Sony 360 thing going on right now. I mean, so there are two angles to it. One, I've heard some amazing demos on for the 3D sound on speakers, kind of where you have like these 64 speaker setups and whatnot. Obviously, you can create miracles with sound in that type of a setting. I honestly haven't yet personally heard an amazing 3D sound demo on headphones. Like there are binaural recordings, which is kind of originally recorded on headphones, and those give a very kind of realistic 3D sound effect. But when it comes to this rendered sound delivered by things like Atmos or Sony 360, I haven't personally yet. I'm kind of always curious to kind of finally get to hear this amazing 3D audio on headphones. I haven't yet heard that myself, but I believe that sooner or later they will probably crack it. I think it's a great thing. I mean, I see personally a lot of application for that in gaming and in all sorts of VR, AR environments, if you can get a realistic 3D rendering of sound on headphones. I'm not sure, kind of now there is quite a bit of a push for 3D sound in music. I'm not fully kind of sold on the idea that the end listener will really want to kind of listen to sound in 3D and kind of guitars flying around his head or whatever. But let's see where that goes. But it's definitely a thing. Sonarworks and the 3D sound, I think, is fully compatible because that's kind of just another dimension of the sound quality. We deal with the frequency response and they deal with the 3D mapping of the sound. So if you can combine both of them, then you're getting both of the benefits.
Right. I was gonna say that you guys are, what you're doing is separate from that, so you could combine it or not. It really doesn't matter. Yeah.
Fully true.
Well, this has been great. Anything else, Martins, that you wanna tell us about Sonarworks or Reference 4 or system wide or Sound ID?
Overall, I think we've covered quite a bit of ground. I hope it has been interesting to everybody who's listening. I hope we brought up some new and interesting angles. I don't know, to sum it up, kind of how I'm thinking about it. We're really kind of on the very high level. Is we're trying to fix with what we're doing at Sonarworks. We're trying to fix the translation problem. And I think the existing paradigm so far in our heads and quite a bit of audio people that I know has been, so there is the translation problem, there is the studio end of it, and then there is the listener end of it. And ultimately you have to solve both ends of it for the translation problem to go away completely, and for you as a creator to be able just do the mix, hear it good in your room, and be confident that it will be delivered in the best shape to every listener. So you have to work on both ends of that equation. And I think so far the paradigm around has been that a holy grail of sound exists. So if only kind of somebody would come up with the right speaker or the right headphone, then that sound would finally rule from studios to the end listeners and everybody would be happy with it. And that kind of keeps on not happening. And I think now this paradigm has changed quite considerably, at least in my head, over the last year, where it seems that neutral reference sound is the best way for sound creators to work on, because that gives them most transparency, most detail, and kind of most neutrality. That's very essential in the creation context. But then in the listening context, it actually serves everybody best if you let people actually to personalize, to customize the sound and let them enjoy it the way they want it, just the way that kind of all our styles and choices about every other thing in the world are different. Kind of somebody likes bright colors, somebody likes them more calm, somebody likes sports cars, and somebody likes off-road cars or whatever. So sound is also, on the listening context, sound is also a matter of preference, and then that kind of seems to be the ultimate answer to the translation problem. Create on reference sound and listen to the sound personalized, and that seems to bring most benefit to creators and to listeners. And ultimately, if we can make it work at scale, then we can be done with the translation problem in the audio world, which I think is exciting. That kind of makes me get up in the morning and work towards it.
Yeah, it excites me too. I love that. I mean, there's nothing. Yeah, it's the translation problem is a problem, and we've all just been dealing with it because there has not been a solution. But I'm so happy that you guys are working on a solution. So really, really happy you're doing what you're doing. So everybody, check out Sonarworks. Martins, thank you for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been fun. And normally, okay, so by the way, my iPad died. Okay, ran out of battery. And so normally what I do is I play music at the end, and then Martins, what we do is we usually yell, sound great, like really loud, like sound great, and we get all into it because there's music pumping. But I think for this episode, what we can do, and I'm going to need you to get, a little closer to your mic for this. Not too close, but closer to your mic. And I think we should, instead of yelling sound great, I think we should just say sound great, and we should say it in a tone as if we're really bored, just for fun. Okay. Let's just do it like that. So, all right, I'll go first. And the whole thing is, everyone listening who's driving in their cars, listening at home, you also have to say it as if you're bored. Okay. All right, I'll go first. Okay. Sound great. All right, now you go.
Sound great.
Oh, that was good. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Martins. We'll end it here, brother.
Hey, thanks.
Take care, man.
Have a great day.
It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. words we did still hold that meaning? And does it mean it's still the same? You're pushing me away. The world your theories now where you're getting worked up on your now. The world your way around somehow now. Yes, it hurts me now where that you don't talk to me now. Now that these worlds have split apart now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? Oh yeah,